Today's guest is a hockey lifer. Craig Button was literally born into the game, a former top-level executive and one of the top analysts in hockey. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show coming up. Our guest today was born in Rochester, New York, a graduate of Concordia University. He was director of scouting for the Dallas Stars, director of player personnel for Dallas when they won the Cup in 1999, vice president, general manager of the Calgary Flames. They won the Calder Cup, went to the Stanley Cup final with the Flames. He was a scout for the Maple Leafs, an analyst for the NHL Network. He is TSN's director of scouting and host of Craig's List. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program, Craig Button. Craig, great to have you here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be with you, Joe. It really is. And, one of the interesting things, you talk about my life in hockey, and my mother was Punch Imlach's secretary. And she was part of the 62-63 Stanley Cup teams in Toronto. So when he went to Buffalo, when my dad was with Pittsburgh, I spent probably as much time in Buffalo because whenever they came to town, Punch and King Clancy, I always made sure that they were going to have dinner with my mother, and little Craig and my brothers were able to go into the Buffalo Sabres dressing room. So as a little kid, that was always something that was pretty cool. But I think back to the legacy. When you're a kid, you don't really know about legacies, but you think back to the legacy of Punch Imlach and King Clancy, and I kind of pinched myself thinking that, wow. And my mother was always kind of low key on the whole thing. And I just sit here in amazement thinking about some of the wonderful people that I've been able to be around and that have influenced me in my life, both in hockey and in broadcast.
Well, you mentioned that. I got to ask you, any stories? Did your mother ever tell you any cool stories about Punch?
Well, so Punch, yeah, this is probably my favorite. So Punch coached Jean Beliveau in Quebec City, and so whenever Jean Beliveau came into Maple Leaf Gardens, he would always want to meet with. He'd always want to come up and say hi to Punch. So my mother was there, and every time she said Jean Beliveau came up, he would say, "Hi, I'm Jean Beliveau." And of course, Jean Beliveau was that dashing, handsome hockey player, right? That really not only was attractive on the ice, but attractive off the ice. And so my mother would always laugh and just say it was interesting that he'd always introduce. She goes, "I know who you are. This is the 11th time this season that you've come up here." And he was always so polite. My mother's maiden name was D'Souza. He would say, "Miss D'Souza, nice to see you," is Mr. Imlach. And everybody was Miss and Mrs. and Mr. So this goes two directions. So so Punch always used to say, she goes, "That's exactly how Jean was. He was from the first time he met him to everywhere in between. That's exactly how he was, appreciative of everybody in his life, polite and understanding." I met Jean Beliveau in Montreal with Bob Gainey once in the alumni room, and Bob introduced me, and he said, "Oh, you might remember, you might know his mother was Punch Imlach's secretary." And Jean Beliveau turned to me and goes, "Miss D'Souza is your mother?" And I'm standing there. First of all, my knees are knocking at meeting Jean Beliveau, right? I'm sitting there. "Oh, your mother was Miss D'Souza?" So all those, because he was in there all the time, right? All the time with Punch, always coming to see Mr. Imlach. So, there was lots of other things. King Clancy was such a character and everything, but, those are the two things that come to mind about Jean Beliveau always coming in. The great rivalry, Montreal and Toronto. And here is the coach Jean Beliveau with the Quebec Aces, and here he is, always coming in to greet him and say hi and see how he's doing. Just wonderful when you think about that history.
Yeah, a real classy gentleman. And you talk about hockey pedigree, Craig. Okay, so your mother worked for Punch. longtime secretary of Punch. Your brother Todd, director of scouting for the Flames. Your father Jack was director of NHL Central Scouting at one point, GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, player recruitment for the Washington Capitals. We actually have a clip of your dad talking about a Caps prospect named Reggie Savage and some others. Let's roll that, Vic.
It was funny that you asked that question, though, because I was just talking to my wife, and she's in Montreal, and she was a little upset because my son, who works for Minnesota, went out to see him play in his duties with Minnesota, went out to see the team, but he came back and said, boy, Reggie Savage is playing well. So within the family, he's playing well.
We got less than 30 seconds, but a couple of other youngsters, Jason Woolley and Trent Klatt. What can you tell us about that?
Here's two kids we drafted last year. Jason Woolley at Michigan State, and our scouts will come in, and they're just telling me how good he's playing and what a good prospect he is. Trent Klatt, drafted out of high school, first year at the University of Minnesota, 17 goals in 24 games, and everybody is talking about Trent Klatt. I really think he's going to be a future goal scorer in this organization.
So there you go, Craig. You were obviously the son he was talking about, working for Minnesota at the time and giving him a little bit of a scouting report via your mother.
my mother was a conduit, right? Like I think it was one of those times when I bounced back into Montreal, stayed at home. My dad was probably on the road. And so I obviously I'd gone down to see Reggie play, and he was already drafted, but it was pretty obvious, Reggie Savage was a pretty good goal scorer. And, Gilbert Perreault was Reggie Savage's coach in junior hockey. And you think about Hall of Famers, great players. And, Gilbert Perreault was that first pick, the spin of the wheel with the Buffalo Sabres, Punch Imlach right in the middle of that. So, it's, the connections, Joe, having been involved in sports and covering sports for a long time, the connections just get smaller and smaller and shorter as you go on. And there's so many of those connections all the way through sport and with the people in sports. So it really is fascinating. But, it was nice. He goes, well, I guess that's the report from the family. I always joke that my father and my brother's cut from the same mold as my dad. They wouldn't tell you if they thought they had a competitive edge. They wouldn't tell you if your pants are on fire. If they thought that would give them a chance to win. So, that's just the way it is. I mean, there was not much information coming out of those two anytime.
Well, your dad was involved. So you're talking about 6 degrees of separation, and in sports, maybe it's 2 degrees, right? So your dad was instrumental in some huge signings, obviously, for the Caps. Here's Caps president David Poile talking about some of those. Here, let's roll that.
I'd like to pay special tribute to the outstanding work that has been done in the last several months by Washington Capitals Director of Player Personnel, Jack Button. Since this summer, he has been successful in completing negotiations to obtain Peter Bondar from Czechoslovakia, Mikhail Tatarinov, and Dmitry Kristich from the Soviet Union. These 3 new players give the Capitals a tremendous amount of young talent and depth on our team. As Bondar and Tatarinov have already made a contribution to the Capitals, I am sure that Dmitry Kristich will make his contribution shortly.
I spent a lot of time in the Soviet Union and in Europe since the 1st of July. As Bogdanov told me in Moscow about 2 weeks ago when I rode on the bus back to the hotel and they were going to the train station, he says, you're in Russia more than I am. So I guess it was just a matter, Lee, of being there, right?
So, of course, that was your father talking in the background. We didn't see him, but we saw Kristich up there. But obviously a big signing for him. He did a lot of work in the Soviet Union to snuff out a lot of this talent. What lessons did you learn from your dad?
Well, I think there's any number of ones, but the lesson that you learned is that you're going to have to do work that is unrewarding to get rewards from that work. And going to the Soviet Union, it was a very different time. I mean, I think back to Rudy Miguel and Jerry Melnick and my father, Barry Fraser of the Edmonton Oilers, the late Barry Fraser, all going over to the former Soviet Union in times where it was massively challenging. I mean, they used to measure the players. They would try to figure out how much the players, like how many inches were on the player's skate. They would measure walls, and then they would watch the player walk past that wall, and they would guesstimate how tall a player was. And then all the contacts that they made over the years, I mean, it was spent over hours and days and weeks and months with people where they tried to build up the trust so they could, not just identify players, but then when it came time to try to get players over and negotiate with the different entities, that's what it had to do. So to get rewards, and I think this is true of any walk of life, there's going to be unrewarding work that has to be done that nobody notices. But if you don't do it, you're not going to get those rewards. And don't turn your nose up at some of the grind work and some of the groundwork that is necessary to do that. And my father never was afraid to roll up his sleeves and go somewhere to find players and to see players. There's an interesting story. And my dad loves spy novels, Joe. He loves spy novels.
Yeah.
So I think somewhere in his true heart, he wanted to be a spy. He would have loved to work for CSIS or the CIA. That's really what he would have loved to have done. But Michael Pavanka, another player from the former Czechoslovakia, he made contact and trying to get him out of the country. But he met Michael, and they made plans to when he was going to go. But he ripped a $5 bill in half. And he gave a half to Michael. He said, the only person you can trust is the person that shows up with the other half of this $5 bill. So at the time, Michael and his then girlfriend, which is now his wife, Renata, were leaving a training camp to break away and come over to North America, met in the middle of the night. Somebody showed him the $5 bill and said, you have the other half of that. Michael pulled it out and knew that he could trust the person. So, and away they went. And it just fascinating some of the things that not just my father, but so many different NHL personnel did. Rudy Miguel was at the center of Alexander McGillney coming over from the Soviet Union. I worked with Jim Lights. He was our president in Dallas. He was a central figure in Fedorov and Konstantinov coming over for the Detroit Red Wings. So being around the different people and hearing their different stories, fascinating to me. But that's not easy work. And I don't want to say it was dangerous because I think that would be a little bit of hyperbole. But you have these ultra competitive people that are trying to find players to help their team be successful. And they went to great lengths to try to affect that in that very manner.
Well, it is like James Bond stuff. It's really cool. I mean, there's definitely a book there. So now this is your background. Did you know from the get-go that hockey was going to be your life?
No, honestly, Joe, I finished playing junior A hockey when I was 20, and I was going to university, and I just made up my mind I'm going to go to university. And the university coach at the time wanted me to play, but I was done. First of all, I wasn't done playing hockey, but to be part of a team, you got to practice, and I was done practicing. I said I was like Allen Iverson. I said practice. I'm not practicing, right? And so I really zeroed in on my university education, and I was headed towards a career in international banking. That's really where I was headed, and I hadn't even honestly. Jack Ferreira, who had worked with my dad in previous years, was working for the New York Rangers, and he'd asked me at one point, "Do you want to do some part-time scouting?" While I was in university, I said, "No, Jack, I'm not interested. I'm going to enjoy my university Fridays and Saturdays." And and then when he became the general manager of the Minnesota North Stars, I wrote him a congratulatory note, and he phoned me and asked me if I'd be interested in working part-time. And I said, "Oh, I know." He goes, "Oh, why don't you just try it? What's the worst thing that can happen? If it doesn't turn out, you can always go back. I know lots of people in the banking industry." And I said, "Okay." I literally took a leap. My current wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, really didn't even tell her. I mean, made the decision, said yes without really, consulting. My dad thought I was completely nuts. But my good fortune began there because I ended up in an organization. They were the worst team in the league. They were a team that didn't have a lot of staff. And so there was great opportunity for me to do a lot of different things. And I ended up with some wonderful people, from Jack Ferreira to Dean Lombardi was the assistant general manager. Les Jackson was an assistant general manager. Chuck Grillo, who was a a former Marine who was a real disciplined person. And then after that, Bob Clark comes in, and then Bob Gainey comes in, and Doug Jarvis and Pierre Pagé. And so, this path, I didn't get to pick the path, but I ended up on a path, and everywhere along it was dotted these absolutely wonderful people. End up down in Dallas. I mentioned about Jim Lights and everything that we were able to accomplish from a success point of view. But I pinch myself. I do pinch myself because I didn't get to airdrop myself into these situations. These are situations that I found myself in, and then the wonderful people that were part of it, so influential for me in so many different ways. And still, those influences that they imparted on me at that time are still a big part of me at this time.
Well, you did some great work in Dallas, obviously Minnesota, then Dallas, and we have a sample of some of your work here from 1995. Roll that, Vic.
Like big, strong, physical two-way players to play for Coach Bob Gainey's team. There's a guy sort of like that from the Kamloops Blazers. Jerome McGinley is another player that they like.
Rumored to maybe be going to Dallas as a head coach.
And you're going to get a look at one of his players, Jerome McGinley, who played for the Kamloops Blazers, selected by the Dallas Stars.
McGinley, very strong two-way hockey player, very strong on the puck. Those are the assets that he brings to the game. He's a very popular selection because he's from nearby St. Albert, Alberta.
A fun moment for you, I'm sure. And was that one of your favorites or favorite moments?
Yeah, it was. I mean, first of all, that was the first lockout in 94, 95. And Norm Green, our owner, it really emphasized to us, we got to keep scouting. A lot of teams stopped scouting. He really said, we cannot not make sure we're out there evaluating the players. Again, unrewarding work to find big rewards. So, we really had a good grasp on the draft that year, and certainly teams were scrambling when the lockout ended to try to see as many of the players as much as possible. But we really felt we had a good handle on the draft class, and Jerome was a player that, wasn't flashy, but we really, really thought that he was somebody that fit the type of player we were looking for in Dallas. And Joe, I'd like to tell you, I thought he'd end up being a 600 goal scorer in the NHL and a Hall of Famer. I'd be lying if I told you. We thought we were getting a really good, 35, 40 goal scorer, perhaps a power forward winger, and somebody that would help us win. But, Jerome, far, I wouldn't say, went beyond his ability, because his abilities are what they were. But our projection, was one of a good, solid player. He was a great player. And I think one of the most phenomenal things for me, and I'll share this quick story with you. We traded him December of 1995 for Joe Nieuwendyk. And it wasn't an easy trade. It was a trade where, we knew we were giving up a really good player, but we were getting a really good player for our team at that time that needed what Joe Nieuwendyk brought. And Joe was fantastic. But I phoned Jerome. He was at the World Junior Camp out in New Brunswick. And he said to me, he goes, well, Craig, we'll never know when our paths cross again. And thanks for everything. And I wished him the best. Anyway, when I became the general manager in Calgary, Jerome phoned me and he said, our paths have crossed again. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, he remembered that. Yeah. And you know what?
Yeah.
It was a trade that worked out all right. Okay. So, you had to trade, obviously, a talent like Jerome McGinley in order to land a talent like Nieuwendyk, and who was a key piece for you guys when they won the Stanley Cup in 1999. Stanley Cup final, it's the Stars and the Sabres, who you had the punch connection there at one time. But in overtime, Game 6, Stars up 3-2 in the series. Brett Hull bangs in the winner. Tell us about that moment. What was that moment like for you?
Well, there was three of us up in the booth upstairs. It was Bob Gainey, Doug Armstrong, assistant general manager, myself, and the game was going along. And Joe, there wasn't much being said, but there was a sense of calm. There was a sense of calm, and watching our team play, we knew we had a really strong team. Buffalo was a really competitive team, and they had Hasha. So they have this really competitive team with this great goaltender. But there was just a sense of calm. And, it's through the course of the game, and then it's first overtime, second overtime. I remember James Patrick hit the crossbar off of a faceoff play. And, when you get to that deep in playoffs, or in overtime, excuse me, players are they're trying to come out on the ice. They're tired. But the first 15, 20 seconds of a shift after a faceoff is usually when you have the most energy at that point in time. So if you go back and watch Dominic Hasek and Eddie Belfour. They knew that, and they kept moving the puck. They knew they didn't want faceoffs, because that is when the players had the most energy deep into an overtime session.
Right.
And James Patrick rang one off the crossbar off of a straight faceoff. And it was one of those ones where I don't think the three of us, Bob, Doug, or myself, even looked at each other. It was just like, okay, keep playing on. And, then we ultimately won. It was just like, wow, you can't believe it. And, I think one of the neatest things for me was we went down to Dallas and we had to build an entirely new staff off the ice and in every area of the ice. And people that cared about hockey, just like such wonderful people. Everybody was there. Everybody was in Buffalo. We flew up a plane from Dallas for everybody to be there, and everybody was part of it. And when I say everybody was part of it, the players knew how important all the different parts of the organization were, and everybody in the organization knew that they were that everybody viewed them as important. So to achieve that together, everybody. And, 6 short years after we had moved down to Dallas and trying to establish a presence down there and everything, and again, with such wonderful people that were so committed, it really was special. Obviously, you win the Stanley Cup. It's special in and of itself. But with the people and the way it happened, it just added another silver lining to the silver lining.
We did have a shot, too, of pretty cool moment when everybody's together on the ice. Vic, I'm not sure if you still have that video queued up, but it's about 2.5 minutes into that video. So there's, you talked about building the family and everything else, and you could see that the organization was pretty tight. You saw some of it at the draft. You saw Gainey sitting there, and all the folks who were involved in that organization. Was that a tight family organization right through?
It was, Joe, and it wasn't just that it was tight. I mean, we were all growing together. I mean, Ken Hitchcock came into our team. He grew as a coach. We had Rick Wilson and Doug Jarvis as phenomenal people. Jim Lights had worked with the Detroit Red Wings, and he came over to our team as the president of our team. And then he watched the Red Wings win in '97. We lost to the Red Wings in '98. But people were growing individually. We were growing collectively, and there's a lot of different moments in time, and the one that I go back to, and it's 1998, and it's back to Joe Nieuwendyk. We lose Joe Nieuwendyk in the first game of the playoffs to a season-ending knee injury. And we go all the way to Game 6 versus the Detroit Red Wings. And, it's disappointing. We were the President's Trophy winners that year, and we lose. We lose in Game 6, and we're sitting down in the coach's office in Joe Louis Arena, and it's eerily quiet. The season's over, and it's just all you hear is the hum of the light bulbs. That's all you're hearing, and nobody says anything. And then Doug Jarvis, he sat back, and Doug is somebody that's he doesn't say much, but when he has something to say, it's impactful and powerful. And he said, "We have a team here. We have a team that plays for one another. We have a team that's willing to do the things to become champions." And he goes, we should be proud of that, and we got to keep that in mind, as disappointing as tonight is. And it's those moments when you have a good team and you have good people, and that you have a chance. There's no guarantees, but you have a chance. And I think it was at that moment in time when you said there was like a re-upping of the commitment. The commitment was already high, but there was a re-upping of that commitment because we knew we had a really strong team and a team capable of winning. And so it is special, and certainly, people growing individually and collectively. Nobody can achieve a Stanley Cup by themselves. It takes everybody to be part of it. And, at the end of that game, the one plane with all the people from the Dallas office, they went back, and then the plane going back was the players, coaches, management, trainers, and all the players got to talk after. Anybody could get up and talk, and it was very interesting. And I remember Brian Scrudling getting up, and he said, "I'm so proud to be part of this team." He goes, "I might only play 5-8 minutes a game." He says, "But I know that Mike Modano, who plays 35 minutes a game, like tonight, he knows that he needs me, and I need him to achieve what I want to achieve, and I want to win the Stanley Cup." And that's what makes a strong team, is understanding that what I need to give and whatever my time on ice is has to be really, really good and really, really strong, no matter when it's called upon. And everybody with that feeling, knowing that everybody's counting on them and that now you have to go and do your part. That's what Stanley Cup teams have, and certainly we had that with our group.
A lot of firsts on that team, right? A lot of people with their firsts on that Stanley Cup winning team. And you talked about Doug Jarvis pointing out that we have a team here. You know, you got a President's Trophy team that comes up short, and the following year, maybe not expected to go so far. Sort of reminded you maybe a Florida Panthers team this year.
Well,
you see some similarities there.
Yeah. Well, again, when teams and you know, Joe, you know this from covering sports. You know, we tend to start a playoff run, and this playoffs start, and you go, well, yeah, you know, you got a 1 seed versus an 8 seed, and you know, how's it going to be? And you know, we pick the favorites for the most part, and you know, we don't see an upset of the Boston Bruins coming. But once it does happen, throw everything else out there in the regular season. And for the Toronto Maple Leafs, yeah, they won their first series since 2004. There's an excitement. There's probably great relief as well. But now you're facing a team that isn't the ace seed anymore. It's not a team that just like found its way into the playoff. It's a team now that is playing really well. And I think the Toronto Maple Leafs has got a real good dose of that. In 1994, our team in Dallas, we took out the St. Louis Blues in 4 straight games, just done, over, finished. We're sitting down in Dallas. We're waiting for the winner of the Calgary-Vancouver series. Well, it goes 5 games, 6 games, 7 games, double overtime. Pavel Bure scores a magnificent goal to send the Vancouver Canucks past the Calgary Flames in an upset. And we're sitting down in Dallas, and we're getting the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, well, we got the Vancouver Canucks. They made short work of us. They beat us in 5 games, Joe, and it wasn't even close. I don't even know how it got to 5 games. And here we are thinking that we are high and mighty, and we've won 4 straight. We faced a team that had now gone through the grind of finding out, hey, this is what it takes to win. They went all the way to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final that year. So it's not like we had anything to be ashamed of, but I think that's what the Toronto Maple Leafs have found themselves in this series versus the Florida Panthers right now.
Yeah, I can see those similarities, right? You know, Florida having the tough series with Boston, the big upset. Now we got licking your chops. I mean, we had a relatively unexpected short series with Tampa. And now we should eat these guys up. Yeah. So I was going to get into that a little bit later, but let's talk about that series. So you have when the Leafs acquired Ryan O'Reilly, you called it a massive win. Why did you call it a massive win?
Because it's not just what Ryan O'Reilly brings himself. I think it's the extension of Ryan O'Reilly. It's the extension of knowing that he can play against any player on the opposition, in any situation. He's that player that fully understands that what playoff hockey is and what the grind is. And I always say this, Joe. Players are committed to winning. Players will pay the price to win. But until you've done it, you don't know what that price is. Ryan O'Reilly knows what the price is. And so that becomes infectious. Now, as a player, and when you have him as Sheldon Keefe as the coach, you can put him out there and have full confidence that he can excel. And then it extends. Now you get opportunities to put Austin Matthews in different spots. You get different opportunities to put John Tavares in different spots to open them up a little bit. And you look at scenarios in the game where you can get the right matchups, where you can get players out against somebody where they can take advantage of them. Well, Ryan O'Reilly gives you that advantage. Ryan O'Reilly gives you that opportunity. And so it's not just what he brought individually on the ice. It's not just what he brought from his own experiences of winning the Cup and Conn Smythe Trophy with St. Louis. It's also how it extends to other players on the ice. And Mike Keane, who was one of the best leaders I was ever around, I mean, his calming influence on Mike Modano, on Jamie Lagenbrunner, on Darian Hatcher, to name just a few, because Mike had won 2 Stanley Cups, and Mike knew, just settle down. Don't worry, we're okay. Just relax. I got it. And it's reassuring. And I think when you bring somebody with Ryan O'Reilly's abilities and his pedigree, that can have a real sense of comfort, knowing that, hey, like, where should I be? What should I do? How should I feel? Ryan, don't worry, that's okay. You make a mistake, don't worry. I mean, in Game 3, it was fascinating to me. This is Ryan O'Reilly. He makes the giveaway, and it ends up being a scoring chance. What does Ryan O'Reilly do? He goes right down to Joe Wall, gives him a little tap. Hey, sorry, that's on me, right? Like, it's taking responsibility for your actions, and it's also acknowledging, hey, you bailed me out. And I think just those little actions become really big. And just, hey, Joe, don't worry, got it, great job. Other players are watching it. Hey, I made a mistake, acknowledge it, move on. And mistakes are part of the game. But Ryan O'Reilly, to me, just has that quiet, competitive confidence that says, I'm here to win this thing, and I'm going to do everything I can to win it. And, if you're not sure yourselves, just watch what I do. And I think that becomes infectious.
What's the problem with the core 4? Is it the inability to rise to the occasion, or is it something that the Panthers are doing to shut them down?
Well, so obviously the other team is trying to stop the best players, right? So that. I mean, on the whiteboard and before the game, 34 is circled, and 16 is circled, and 91 is circled, and 88 is circled. I mean, they know that. And I think that through the experiences of these players, now it becomes a case of trying to understand, okay, we know what they're trying to do to us. How do we find a way to combat that? My concern, Joe, and it is a concern, and we look at Florida, but let's look at Game 5 versus Columbus in 2020. Let's look at Games 5, 6, and 7 versus the Montreal Canadiens in 2021. Let's look at Games 6 and 7 last year versus Tampa Bay. And, trying to find a way to get over the proverbial hump, trying to find a way to get on the right side of it. I think that's where these players find themselves. Listen, we heard it for years. Oh, you'll never win with Ovechkin. Well, I'll take my chances. I lived in Detroit. They said you won't win with Yzerman. I'll take my chances. I'll take my chances with Matthews and Marner. And what they have to do though is, not only understand what the other team is doing to them, but then muster up another level. And that level doesn't have to be a massive jump, but another level that just says, you know what? I know what you're doing. You're not going to stop me. Or I'm going to make it really hard for you to stop me. And when you think about Austin Matthews' skill and you think about Mitch Marner's skill, just that little bit of understanding of just a little bit more. And I think that a lot of times players think it's got to be a lot more. It's not a lot more. It's just a little more. And I think that finding that little bit more will get them over we all want it to happen quicker. It might not happen. It took Steve Yzerman until 1997. He at that point in time, he'd been 14 years in the league. And, everything that went, he'd been to a Stanley Cup final in 1995. He'd had success as an individual player. And it wasn't that he wasn't trying to win, just had to find. And sometimes it's not just you individually, it's what's around you. And I use Steve as just an example. Again, Matthews, who's going to say you don't want Matthews or Marner or Nylander or Tavares on your team? You want those players. But at the same time, sometimes it just doesn't happen as quick as we'd like it to. And as great as players can be, sometimes they have to go along that path of discovery as well.
Well, when I think about Yzerman, I think one of the big changes that happened in Detroit is when Scotty Bowman, came in there, and I think from what I understand, he had a lot to do with Yzerman changing his game to become more of the team guy. Is there something that has to happen in that Toronto dressing room somehow, some way, to create more of a team thing going on here, or are these guys just going to eventually bloom or not?
Yeah, it's a great question. Scotty, I remember one night listening to Scotty on a late night talk show in Detroit, and they asked him about Steve, and he goes, Steve did exactly what the Detroit Red Wings asked him to do. They asked him to be a player that could, revive the franchise and be a top player. And he said he did all of those things. He scored. He was a top player in the NHL, and individually he was great. He goes, but the team around him wasn't all that great. But he said, as our team got better and we had really good players and we added really good players, I felt, this is Scotty talk, he said, I felt Steve could help us in other areas. He goes, but when you're identified now as the player that has to score all the time and you that's all you've been asked to do, and now you're asked to do some different things, he goes, there's some finesse that goes with that. And there's some finessing that is necessary in making sure that you celebrate that the player is doing these other things for the benefit of the team, because we have others that can take the burden off of them offensively. And I think that's where Detroit found themselves. And, you think about some of the changes, and Scotty had some high-powered offensive teams in Detroit. And then he realized, hey, listen, maybe we can't win with this type. And then they added Marty LaPointe and Chris Draper and Kirk Maltby and Darren McCarty and players that gave you what I would call a little more difficulty to play against deeper down your lineup. Yeah, they had Fedorov, they added Shanahan, and you think about Larry Onoff and Kozlov. I mean, they had great players, but they also made their team deeper and deeper down the lineup. They didn't just put it on 4 or 5 players. That, again, I go back to being a team. A group of players is not going to win for you. I look at Tampa Bay Lightning, and they had that 62-win season in 2019. They got dusted in 4 straight. What does Julien Brisebois do? We need Blake Coleman. We need Barclay Goodrow. We need different types of players. We had Yanni Gourde. And you could probably say right now that the Tampa Bay Lightning aren't as good because they don't have Gourde, and they don't have Goodrow, and they don't have Coleman, and they don't have Palat. They still have all those top-end players, but they're not as good a team. And I think that that's where Detroit found themselves, and I think that that's where Toronto may have to do an examination as well.
Yes, there's another example of a team that won the President's Trophy. Were badly disappointed that year, and then turned around the following year and came back. Another Florida Panthers story. So let's, you before the playoffs started, your picks were Boston and Edmonton, which is your bracket, right? So obviously, Boston blew a lot of brackets for a lot of different people. I picked the Leafs and I picked the Oilers. Obviously, it's not looking very good for the Leafs right now. But you did pick the Oilers, and as did I. And aside from the little setback last night, the 5-1 setback, I mean, if you look at the first 2 games, I mean, Draisaitl scores 4 goals, and they still lose. Comes back the next game, and he scores a couple. McDavid scores a couple. But the Oilers are sort of a different team than the Leafs, for example. They're getting a lot of production from their biggest guns. And what is the difference in that? Like, why is that happening?
Well, one of the things that I think happens is that Jay Woodcroft can put Draisaitl and McDavid together, and individually they're a handful. But when you put them together, I think it becomes a real significant challenge for the opponent. And McDavid's the best player on the planet. Draisaitl, if anybody's going to argue that he's not the second best player on the planet right now, I might vehemently disagree. So you have these, and keep in mind what they did last year. So they came out of last year with a lot of confidence in terms of how they play and what they need to do come playoff time. So, I talk about that, that period of time. We want it to be shorter, But, Draisaitl and McDavid have been in the league longer than Matthews and Marner and Nylander.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about, and there was questions about, McDavid's going to have to show it in the playoffs and, and what goes with playoff hockey. And, Wayne Gretzky famously said there's 4 seasons, the preseason, the regular season, the playoffs, and then the Stanley Cup final. And now you have to go through those things to understand them and go through those different experiences to understand them. And I think that that's what's happened for McDavid and Draisaitl. It's always happening for players. And when you really start to understand it and apply it, I think that that's when you can become a little bit more comfortable in knowing, okay, this is what it takes and this is what I have to do. Not that it's easy. It's never easy. But now you understand it and you can do it. I think that's where McDavid and Draisaitl find themselves. And when you dominate the playoffs like they did last year, I think that certainly is going to buoy anybody's confidence. And when you're 2 of the best players on the planet, if not the 2 best, then you certainly become a handful. And the Edmonton Oilers also, we look at McDavid and Draisaitl, just like Toronto with Matthews and Marner, and you just think just because of 2. The Edmonton Oilers, this is the best team they've had since Connor McDavid's been there. We can argue that this is the best team or near the best team that Toronto's had, but it's not just about a couple of players. It's always about more than a couple of players. And if you're just going to look to 2 players, I think that's where you can fall short, because it's going to take a lot more than 2 players to have success when it comes to playoff hockey.
Well, yeah, look, Ekholm has been a great acquisition. Darnell Nurse says, he has his moments, of course, but he's a solid guy, and he takes no crap. And Evander Kane is a beast too, and he takes some criticism too. But Evander Kane he makes things happen, and pretty good team. The goaltender has been, goaltending has been pretty solid to this point up until last game. But when I made the prediction, well, I said, does this look like a possibility to you? And I put the McDavid versus Austin Matthews posted on social media. Get a lot of pushback from people who say things like Gary Bettman would never allow an Edmonton-Toronto Stanley Cup final. What do you say to people who say such things?
Well, what confounds me, Joe, is that the NHL keeps things so close to the vest, and certainly a lot of their plans are in a vault. I mean, the NHL already knows who the Stanley Cup finalists are this year. They determined that last summer. They had a big meeting to get away, right? So I don't know how that is leaked out now. They're like, how do they know that Gary already has the Stanley Cup finalists?
Who's the leak? Who's the leak?
And Gary doesn't want to come out and say who's the leak, because then he would be saying that this is true. So he's got to remain silent on the whole thing. Anyway, I mean, what I call it is it's the fans, and what makes this game so wonderful is the passion of the fans. If there's no passion in the game and there's no passion from the fans, you are not going to have the excitement. You're not going to have the banter. You're not going to have everything that goes with being a fan. I mean, you look at Maple Leaf Square during Game 3. I mean, it's raining, it's drizzling. I mean, that place is packed because everybody wants to be together cheering for their team. Joe, we started this off earlier. We didn't start off it earlier. Our team in Minnesota, the state of hockey in Minnesota, a passionate hockey city. They didn't have NHL hockey for 7 years. We left in 1993. And we didn't leave because Minnesota wasn't a good hockey market or wasn't great fans. They had become dispassionate. They'd become fed up with the Minnesota North Stars. They came to a point where they didn't care anymore. They weren't mad. They weren't happy. They weren't sad. It was just like, okay, see ya. And when you get to that environment, you're in trouble. And that's why the Minnesota North Stars left. It wasn't because it wasn't a hockey market. It was because the people had just become, there was no feeling, there was no emotion attached anymore. So now when you look at the fans and on anything, the referees, like, I can't believe this referee's against this. And I can't believe that, Gary Bettman is going to do this or whatnot. that's the passion of the fan speaking. And we need the passion of the fan. But just because you have emotion and you have passion doesn't always mean you have rationale in those thoughts. And so I think you have to be able to separate them. And I think that's the way I looked at it.
Well, clearly and obviously, the players will determine who the winner is. They always do. And sometimes there's bad calls, and sometimes Kerry Fraser misses a high stick. I mean, things happen at moments, right? But it's not like Gary Bettman sitting there going, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have this team beat this team. Then ask it because, you just possibly, you wouldn't be able to control the outcome of a 30-second shift, let alone the outcome of a hockey game. And anybody who's played the game and understands the game in any way, shape, or form would know that. First of all, when you do hear people say things, well, Gary Bettman would never allow an all-Canadian final. First of all, it would be probably the best thing that ever had to happen to hockey, to see an Edmonton Oilers Maple Leafs, period. And secondly, there would be absolutely no way to determine that. I mean, you could have one bad call after another bad call after another. Hey, remember when Canadian women beat the U.S. in the Olympics, and I think it was 2000 and maybe Salt Lake City.
Wasn't that 2012 in London?
Maybe 2012.
Oh, no, you're talking about the women.
No, I'm talking about the women's hockey team. The women's hockey team. 02, and they had like 5-6 calls against them in a row. Boom, 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 boom. And they still beat the Americans, right? It's like eventually, the cream rises to the top. The cream rises to the top, and whoever probably wants it the most, ultimately, isn't it?
Well, Wayne Gretzky, here we have a lot of Wayne Gretzky in here, and the missed call, the missed high stick. Right? So that's the most recent one. But those Edmonton Oilers teams in the early '80s were great. And in 1983, they went and played the New York Islanders. They lost 4 straight games in the Stanley Cup final. That was the boys on the bus. Those were those high flying Oilers. And Gretzky talked about it. He said he walked past the Islanders dressing room, and he said they're all sitting back there, beat up, damaged, hurt. They're happy, but he said walking past, he goes, that was when he realized that the price to be paid to win is far greater than they had done. Experience, understanding it. Joe, one of the lines that I use, I say, if you came into a dressing room of players and you said, who wants to win? Well, everybody's hands going up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now your second question is, okay, who's willing to pay the price? Well, everybody's hand is going up. I mean, that's a given. But the third question is where it becomes hard. Who knows what the price is? And Wayne Gretzky had to go through it. Mark Messier had to go through it with Edmonton in 1983, and Wayne talked about it after losing that series. And then they came back. Willing to pay the price and knowing the price are two different things. And then even when you know the price, and that's why it's so hard to repeat, because once you've done it once, you know what that price is. And then it's about committing to that price again. And, I talk about Austin Matthews and I talk about Mitch Marner. Great players. And sometimes it's just a little bit more, just a very little bit more to understand that's what's going to give us the edge and get us on the right side of a game, of a series. And if the greatest player on the planet that's ever played, Wayne Gretzky, can get dusted like they did in 1983 in the Stanley Cup final with all the excitement around it, and he says, wait a second, I didn't know. That's okay. Keep building. And, when you think about great players, and you think about how many, Wayne Gretzky only won 4 Stanley Cups. Does that mean he failed in those other years? No, he didn't fail. He gave everything he had. And I think that's where teams, whether it be Yzerman back in the 90s, whether it be right now, or Ovechkin when he was being doubted if he could ever win, or right now with Toronto. I'll take my chances with great players and players that can make an impact in the game. Sometimes we want it to happen sooner, and sometimes it doesn't happen on our timetable, but I'll take my chances on those guys because they're terrific, top-notch players.
And in your opinion, it's a good idea to stick with this group?
Well, when we talk about the group, changes happen every single year, Joe, with teams, with Stanley Cup winning teams, And so I don't think it's so much about just saying we're sticking with the group. It's about, is there something that can make us better? Is there something that can give us a better opportunity to go deeper and to add some different players that can help us? And that's not done, I think, with emotion. It's not done in the vacuum. So, but when you have Austin Matthews and you have Mitch Marner and you have the talent that is in Toronto, what I would say is be very careful about falling victim to the disappointment of losing and saying, oh, we got to blow it up or we got to change everything. I think teams have done that in the past, and with the idea that they would move forward, and they move backwards. And in a lot of cases, they move backwards in a more significant way and for a longer time than the objective of moving forward. So again, I don't know where you find players like Mitch Marner. I don't know where you find players like Austin Matthews. William Nylander has a fantastic contract. He's a point-a-game player. So all I would say is be careful about saying you can't win with this core. Be careful about saying, oh, we got to change it. Where would the changes come and what do they mean to your team? And obviously in the salary cap world, things come into play that you have to make financial decisions on. And certainly that's part of the evaluation. But when you have good players, and Scotty Bowman reminded me of this over the years. He goes, in this league, he goes, if you don't have skill and you don't have talent, you're not going to win. It doesn't matter. So be careful about being dismissive of talent and thinking you can just replace that. That's a hard thing to do. So I'm not saying that yes, and I'm not saying no, but there's good players there, and the evaluation has to go. I think it has to be a full and complete evaluation, not just one that zeroes in on change the core, dial it back, or don't dial it back.
Blow it up. Whatever.
Yeah.
So my wife's an astute analyst of the game. She's a big Leafs fan, and her observation. My current wife, as you would say, her observation would be the guys have the core group. Their hands are a little tight on the stick right now. They're just a little bit. They're just not being themselves. They're not playing the way they did against Tampa. There's something going on. They just seem to have a little bit of that nervous energy, and they're overplaying it.
Well, I totally agree. And again, you're pressing. You want so badly to achieve something. They do. I have no doubt about that with respect to their desires. But sometimes in your quest and in wanting something so bad, sometimes you do just tighten up. I'm going to 1998, we were playing San Jose in a playoff series. We had just traded for Mike Keane. And Mike Modano told me this story. He said I think he said it was game 4. It's a tight game. It's midway through the game. And Mike is on the bench, Modano, and he's feeling a little anxious. And he said, Mike Keane was sitting next to him. He just turned to him. He said, he put his hand on my arm. He said, Mike, just keep doing what you're doing. He goes, you don't have to do more. We're a good team. We just got to keep playing. Don't do less, but you don't have to start doing more. And Mike said to me, he goes, that's the feeling you get, that you got to do more. You got to do more. And he goes, it was just so comforting to know that what I was doing was good enough and to just keep doing it. We talked earlier about Ryan O'Reilly, that influence, that impact, and just calming players down. Because as you just pointed out with your wife talking about it, I think that maybe just a calming down and just keep playing. Your next shift, just keep playing at a high level. And if it doesn't, the next shift, same thing. That's really important for players because they do feel it. They do feel, and they do get anxious. Try to keep them in a state of competitive, what I call competitive calm.
Yeah. So, Craig, maybe the Leafs can become that fifth team to bounce back from a 3-0 series deficit. So, I want to turn the tables here just a little bit.
Okay, can I just interject for a second? Okay, so
yeah,
one of those teams that came back from a 3-0 deficit was the New York Islanders. And it was in 1975 versus the Pittsburgh Penguins when my dad was the general manager there. And I remember sitting in the arena I guess I don't know what I was, 11 years old at the time, 10 years old at the time. And I remember sitting in the arena, and they lost 1-0. Ed Westfall scored the winning goal, 1-0 in Game 7. So I was there for one of those 4 times. I wasn't there in 1942 when the Leafs came back from 3-0 down, just to be clear.
Me neither.
But I was sitting in the arena in Pittsburgh, and then the Islanders nearly pulled it off in the next series versus Philadelphia. You remember Kate Smith singing "God Bless America." They brought her out, and then the Islanders players were bringing her roses to try to bring. I mean, the superstitions were all coming to play in that series, and the Flyers ended up winning and going on to win the cup. But I was there for one of those 4 in the building, Joe. So, maybe they're, listen, it starts with 1 win on Wednesday. That's where it starts.
That's right.
How you gotta, that's how you got to proceed.
Yeah. Yep. It's always one shift, one game at a time. So, okay. So the Blackhawks win the lottery. Pretty lucky. Conspiracy theorists will say it was fixed, but but there you go. And tell us, how good a player is Connor Bedard?
He's top drawer. I mean, I'm reticent to use the word generational. I got to that point at the World Junior in January, because he is generational. You don't see that type of player come along, and he's different. He's different than Lemieux, and he's different than Crosby, and he's different than Lindros, and different than McDavid. But it's not like one mold of player makes up a generational player. And from the time he was 15 years of age, stepping into the Western Hockey League, stepping on the international hockey stage and dominating. He dominated the U18 as a 15-year-old. He dominates the World Junior as a 16, 17-year-old en route to 2 gold medals. And it's not just that you're performing at that level. At the World Junior tournament just completed in January 2023, I mean, he was the best player, and it wasn't even close. There was nobody near him. And watching Connor Bedard, the last player that dominated junior hockey at this age like him was Wayne Gretzky in 1977-78. And people say to me, oh, well, what about McDavid? I said, he dominated junior hockey, and Crosby dominated junior hockey, and Lemieux dominated junior hockey. The difference is Connor McDavid did it at the World Junior Tournament against everybody 2 and 3 years older than him. And the last player to do that, dominating his league and dominating the World Junior at that age, was Wayne Gretzky. So is he Wayne Gretzky? No, he's not Wayne Gretzky. But the dominance that Connor Bedard has shown through his career in the Western Hockey League at every level and in every situation, that's generational. And for the Chicago Blackhawks to have that player to build around and to build with, that puts you into a belief that you will be a Stanley Cup contender in the future. That future isn't near because the Blackhawks aren't at that place yet. But when you have Connor Bedard, just like McDavid, just like Crosby, just like Lemieux, you become very realistic about being a Stanley Cup contender, and that's where the Blackhawks find them after winning the lottery.
Yeah, there's something special about a player like that, that allows them to reach that level, that allows them to get there, and that tends to transfer, ultimately to their teammates. It just does. Like all the guys. You look at Gretzky and Lemieux and Yzerman and and Sid Crosby and McDavid. It's happening now, so it's a thing. And so championships could be coming back to Chicago. Listen, Craig, I do want to just touch back. Like, you're an astute analyst of talent, when it comes to drafting players and everything else. And that probably has a lot to do with the fact that you were, weaned in the game as a hockey executive, and you've been able to study talent and see that for a long, long time. I want to go back, Vic. I'm just going to throw you off here a little bit. It's back when you were an analyst, just became an analyst probably with TSN. We're talking about the mock draft from 2015 when you predicted that who the Leafs would take at number 4. And if we can roll that, if you can find that for us, Vic.
Well, they have some options here, forward or defense, and I think you have to look at this pick also with the 24th pick. But for that reason, I am picking Mitch Marner at 4 from the London Knights, an unbelievably creative player, elusive. I have never left a game saying to myself, geez, I wonder about his size, because he controls the game. He has the puck. He makes plays that are going to not only create scoring chances, but if you're a line mate of his, you better be ready for the puck, because while you may think that it's not coming to you, he believes that it is coming to you, and more than not, he does get it to you. An unbelievably gifted, creative player.
Right. Very prophetic, Craig. Yeah, what are your thoughts now, having some time, 8 years to digest that?
Well, you know what? It's one of those things like, sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. My great friend Les Jackson said, when you're making predictions, you can only be one of two things, right or wrong. And so, in that case, I was right. And, I think player evaluation is fun. I love doing it. And these players all have great aspirations. But I think over time, you look at it and you watch a player, and I watched Mitch Marner for a long time. And certainly when you watch those types of skills, and I said this even with Mishkov, and people ask me about Mishkov, you can talk yourself out of any player you want. You can talk yourself out of them based on size. You can talk a player based on passport or nationality. But I just talked to you about Scotty Bowman saying you win with skill and you win with talent. And when you see that skill and talent, you better recognize it and you better, celebrate it, because it's on display. And what Mitch did in junior hockey, he has totally translated it to the National Hockey League.
Yep, amazing player. Listen, Craig, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this.
It's been a great pleasure, Joe, to join you on your show. I mean, your passion is great and deep and long, and so to be part of this with you I feel greatly honored that you asked me to be part of it. And hopefully, sometime in the future, you'll ask me to be on again, and you can bring out some of my other, probably only 2 or 3 times I was right, and show them off, because it'll become part of my reel.
Okay, don't worry, they're standing by, and occasionally wrong too. All right, thanks so much, Craig. We'll have more sports when we come back. Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a special contest. We have some tickets to give away for the Hockey Hall of Fame, and we have 4 of them, thanks to Robin and the folks at the Hockey Hall of Fame. Now, if you want to go, just send me a DM. Now, the best reason why you want to go to the Hockey Hall of Fame, give me the best reason. I'll take the best reason, and you will get those tickets. So drop me a DM and give me a reason for why you want to go to the Hockey Hall of Fame. Now my Costa Swiss pick of the week. Last week, I took the number 2 horse, Enola, in the opening race from Thursday night's Carter Mohawk. Enola went off at 11-1, was challenging late, but check out the 9 horse on the outside, Stonebridge Bravo, with Bob McClure in the buggy, gets it done at 29-1. Enola got up for second, so we got our place bet. The 926 trifecta returned $3,759.90. Oh, that would have been sweet, but I did have a superfecta on Friday night. Okay, now this week, the 7th for Mohawk, a trot for fillies and mares. I like Bob McClure and Warraway Yes, who was a close 3rd after a difficult trip last week. And let's box the exacta and trifecta 3, 5, and 6. For all the racing updates, visit Costa TV on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Go to hpibet.com for your wagering options.
Joe Tilley Sports is brought to you by COSA, Central Ontario Standardbred Association, providing a united voice for harness horse people racing at Ontario tracks. Check out your benefits today at COSAonline.com and check out COSA TV on Facebook and YouTube for all the latest harness news and live action updates. Live racing year-round. Go to hpibet.com for all your wagering options. Become a member today, and your first bet is free. That's hpibet.com. Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. the only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Number 7, exploring the village and market was another topper of our trip to Egypt. We love seeing the vibrant colors and hearing the lively chatter of locals as they went about their daily lives. The experience gave us a sense of the local culture and traditions. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today. We want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. And thank you for your support of Canadian and local sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Spanglish Network, Zingo TV, and Buzz TV Live. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past great shows are there. Lots of different clips. Like and subscribe. It is absolutely, positively free. Thanks once again to Craig Button for being on the program. It was a real pleasure having him on. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Do you want to buy or sell a home? Could 31 years of real estate experience help you? Why not speak to an amazing team that loves to overpromise and over-deliver? Aldo has a tremendous team of experts on staff. They are committed to making your next real estate transaction smooth and comfortable. Call 416-GET-ALDO or visit getaldo.com. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. And let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more.